Welcome to the VEROSCOPE analysis today in the Karen Read trial of Sergeant Sean Goode, who is being cross-examined. If you're new to the trial or you haven't seen Sean Goode before, the witness, this is Sergeant Goode. And as we'll be discovering during the analysis, perhaps he isn't so good after all. Is he bad, Sergeant? That's what we're going to discover. A quick thank you to the trial channel for allowing us to use the video. We're going to be watching Sergeant Goode on the stand, and then we're going to be going through the forensic linguistics analysis and see where Sergeant Goode is deceptive and perhaps where the judge is also, in my opinion, slightly biased is perhaps the way to describe it. We'll be running through, perhaps in part two, depending on how we get on, even the part where the judge says to the prosecution, would you like to object? And the prosecution says, yes, objection. And the judge says, sustained. It was unbelievable. Anyway, look out for that part. But there are other parts as well, which we'll be running through, where essentially the jury are kept from vital information. And so that's something that we'll be analysing seriously. Okay, let's carry on and begin and see what Sergeant Goode has to say for himself. I'll play the tape now.
Good afternoon, Sergeant.
Afternoon.
Sir, you and I have never met, correct?
No.
We've never spoken?
No.
Sergeant Goode, you grew up in Canton?
I did.
You attended Canton Public Schools?
I did.
You graduated from Canton High School?
I did.
That would have been in 1998?
Yes.
Is it true that in your graduating class was somebody named Courtney Proctor?
Yes.
You knew Courtney Proctor?
Yes.
You knew her to be Michael Proctor's sister, correct?
Yes.
Also in your graduating class was somebody named Jill Daniels, correct?
Yes.
You knew her, or you now know her, to be Christopher Albert's sister-in-law, correct?
Yes.
Christopher Albert is married to Jill Daniels' sister, correct?
Yes.
And you know Christopher Albert as Brian Albert's brother, correct?
Yes.
So it is fair to say that you graduated high school with Michael Proctor's sister and Christopher Albert's sister-in-law, correct?
Yes.
And, growing up in Canton and, working for 18 years as a Canton police officer, you're well familiar with the Albert family of Canton, correct?
I work with one of them.
You know that the Albert family is a well-known family in Canton, correct?
Sure.
Okay, so did you notice the change in linguistics? He was suspiciously willing to go along with the identification that he knows people involved on the periphery of the trial and people who are witnesses in the trial. He knows of them and he's grown up. It was willing to go along with that, but as soon as it got close and sensitive, notice how the language changed. So let's begin the analysis. And before we do so, we should look at some critical context. Before examining Sergeant Goode's testimony, it's important to understand what questions were asked but never actually answered during the cross-examination. For instance, 3 times during the questioning, and we're talking about Judge Canoni here, the prosecutor objected and the judge sustained, preventing certain lines of inquiry from reaching the jury. Luckily, twice the jury found Karen Read innocent of the murder charge. Whether these were proper legal rulings or not is beyond the scope of my ability and of this linguistic analysis. But the effect is clear. The jury was prevented from hearing answers to questions that directly concerned evidence integrity and investigative patterns. So what are we talking about? What sort of thing? Well, moment one, the report photo question. The defense, would you agree with me that someone reading this report and seeing that the date and time of the report is listed as January the 29th, 2022 at 8:24 a.m. That's when you wrote it, correct? That's when I logged in, yes. Somebody reading that and seeing a photo of a piece of taillight might believe that that photo is from the same date that you're writing the report, correct? So, in other words, the defense are pointing out that Sergeant Goode is writing reports and then altering them and adding things, but not changing the date or making that clear. He's adding extra things after the fact. The prosecutor, objection sustained by the judge. So the jury aren't allowed to hear the evidence with regards to Goode's changing of the evidence. The defense, you think it's misleading to include a photo on the face sheet of the report when the report is dated January the 29th, 22, and the photo is not from that day, it's from some time later. Objection sustained. What the jury heard, the facts about the two different report versions and their identical timestamps. What the jury didn't hear was Goode's opinion on whether this presentation could mislead someone reading the report. Okay, let's carry on with the cross-examination, and notice we've already seen, or heard rather, Goode's change in linguistics as soon as the questions became sensitive. We therefore have to ask ourselves, why is a Canton police officer becoming deceptive on the witness stand in terms of his linguistics? Why? And why does every single police officer, apart from Barros, who, if you haven't heard Sergeant Barros's testimony, do so. We've got a VEROSCOPE analysis of him on the stand. He's truthful. In fact, he's probably the Serpico of this case in some senses. He's the only honest police officer that has testified as far as I'm concerned. This individual is deceptive on the witness stand, and we have to, with his linguistics, and we have to ask why. Why?
The Albert family is well connected to the town of Canton, correct?
I don't know what you mean by connected. They live in Canton, yes.
All right, well...
Okay, so one of the ways which people are deceptive is they question the question, they avoid the question, they change the question, they reluctantly answer after doing those sorts of things. And here we saw an example of that.
Christopher Albert is a Canton town selectman, is he not?
Yes.
And you've already established that Kevin Albert is a Canton police officer, correct?
Yes.
And you already testified that you knew Brian Albert as well, and you knew that he was a Boston police officer who lived in Canton, correct?
Yes.
In fact, he and his family lived at 34 Fairview in Canton, correct?
Yes.
You also knew that his family had been there for years before Brian...
Notice he's able to say yes, 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 when questions aren't sensitive or don't need hedging or don't require deception. He might also say words like correct or correct, and doesn't need any hedging when the truth is quite safe to say. When the truth becomes unsafe to say, and ask yourself, why should the truth become unsafe to say? But when it does with this individual, the hedging and deception patterns begin. With the support of the judge.
Albert owned the house, his parents owned it, correct?
Yes.
Now, as of January 28th of 2022, who among the Albert family did you know either personally or professionally?
Professionally is Kevin Albert.
Okay, and what about personally?
I knew Chris.
And you know that Christopher Albert, in addition to being a town selectman...
That facial expression is unconscious. It's essentially shut up. That's what's going on inside at the unconscious level. He doesn't want to say too much because Yannetti is touching on sensitive ground. The truth might start to appear.
Also owns a pizza place in Canton, correct?
Yes, he does.
What's the name of that pizza place?
That'd be D&E.
And have you eaten there before?
Yes,
You've seen Christopher Albert there before?
I have.
There he's beginning to have difficulty breathing and swallowing because it's close to the truth.
Now, on January 29th of 2022, you learned at approximately 6 a.m. that John O'Keefe's body was found on Brian Albert's front lawn, correct?
Yes,
And as of January 29th of 2022, you knew that Brian Albert at that time, of course, was the brother of your fellow Canton police officer, Kevin Albert, correct?
yes.
And how long have you known Kevin Albert for?
As long as I worked at the Canton Police Department.
And that is approximately 18 years?
Coming up in 18 years, yes.
And is Kevin Albert older or younger than you or around the same age?
He's older than me.
By how many years, if you know?
I don't. Probably
Approximately?
5 years?
Okay. Have you ever shared a patrol car with Kevin Albert?
No.
Have you ever worked on an investigation or a case with Kevin Albert?
I probably have, yeah.
In addition to being a colleague, would you also consider Kevin Albert to be a friend?
So hedging with things like, I probably have, yeah, that's deceptive language because he doesn't want the truth to be, he doesn't want a torch shone on the truth of how close he is to the witnesses in this murder trial.
Yeah, we've socially hung out after work.
And because he is a fellow Canton police officer.
So again, it had to be hedged. Look at his face. You'll notice that during the testimony, he's very expressive. There's a huge amount of arrogance in his facial expressions. Look for that.
So you'd expect that he would have your back in a crisis, correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
No, I'll let him have it.
Now, the judge is talking to the jury. This is the defense in a murder trial. I'll let him have it is the sort of language that she's essentially throughout this trial, and we're going to be studying this judge's language, and we're going to be pinpointing the exact areas where bias appears. I'll let him have it is a communication, and it's consistent drip, drip, drip to the jury of her opinion in this case. It's disgusting behavior.
I hope he would defend me while working. Yes, he's a police officer.
You would certainly protect him in a crisis, correct?
At work, when we're police officers, yes.
Sure. Well, even out of work, if he was in a crisis, you'd probably help, correct?
I don't know what you're asking.
Well, there is a teamwork that is part and parcel of being a police officer with your fellow officers, correct?
Sure.
It's a dangerous job.
Sure.
You need to have each other's back.
Sure.
You need to depend on your fellow officers, correct?
Sure.
And it's been
Look at the little smirk on this individual's face. Right, let's get back to the actual analysis itself. So, moment two. Despite the fact that he was charged, are you aware that the case was just flat out dismissed upon restitution? Talking about the Albert case later on. Objection moved to strike. Objection sustained. What's the judge doing? What the jury heard? Tim Albert, and look out for this part of the trial as we go on. Tim Albert was charged with hit and run in 2009 after strong evidence led to 34 Fairview, and he admitted leaving the scene. What the jury didn't hear, that despite the strong evidence and admission, the case was dismissed. The pattern. These objections come at precise moments when the defence was attempting to establish whether the altered report could mislead readers about the evidence found, whether there was a pattern of cases involving the Albert family at this address being resolved favorably by friends in law enforcement. And the legal propriety of these objections is not our concern. But from a linguistic perspective, these blocked questions by the judge represent missing data, answers that might have provided additional context for interpreting Goode's other statements. And this is a pattern throughout the trial. This isn't just one random witness. This is Judge Cannoni's pattern and the prosecution pattern. What we can analyze is what Goode did say and what his language patterns reveal about his knowledge and state of mind. Now, let's examine Sergeant Goode's testimony through the lens of forensic linguistics. So that's the background. Here we have Sergeant Sean Goode, 18 years law enforcement. We're looking at the death of Officer John O'Keefe on Brian Albert's lawn, a fellow Boston cop. No longer. We had a mistrial in trial one, and then she was found guilty. Karen Read was found innocent. confusing my own words. I'm becoming deceptive after watching these deceptive people. Okay, so where are we? Part one. I work with one of them, he said. You're well familiar with the Albert family of Canton, correct? So this is, can you see this is hedging? He doesn't answer directly. When somebody doesn't answer directly, we see that as deceptive and we put in a flag. Single individual flags don't mean anything by themselves, so we look for clusters of these flags and superclusters, and then we can begin to determine if a statement is deceptive or not. We have a collective. Goode doesn't say I work with Kevin Albert. He says one of them, using language that treats the Albert family as a collective unit rather than describing an individual professional relationship. This linguistic choice is noteworthy given the nature of the question. Critical discovery 2, the connected evasion. The Albert family is well connected to the town of Canton, correct? I don't know what you mean by connected. They live in Canton, yes. So it's obstructive. It's gradually revealing his state of mind. It's like this type of witness with this sort of attitude, essentially being deceptive to stop the truth coming out. It's like dragging blood out of a stone. The comprehension claim. Connected is common, widely understood language, meaning influence, power, or significant relationships within a community. Yet Goode responds with, I don't know what you mean by connected, before immediately reducing their significance to simple residence. So he's dismissing the connected and then wants to reduce it to they live in Canton, and then answers the question. Yes. So this pattern where they answer the question after their attempt to diminish is normally deceptive as a principle. This creates an interesting pattern, claiming confusion about straightforward language, then providing a minimal answer that doesn't address the actual question. Whether this represents genuine confusion or strategic evasion, the effect is to avoid acknowledging the Alberts family position in Canton's power structure, which includes a town selectman, a police officer, and generational property ownership. Discovery 3. I knew Chris. Who among the Albert family did you know, either personally or professionally? Professionally is Kevin Albert, okay? And what about personally? I knew Chris. So here we begin to see the patterns of deception which we know so well if you've been watching the VEROSCOPE videos. By the way, if you're new to statement analysis and if you're new to forensic linguistics and forensic linguistic intelligence, do consider subscribing. Or if you're very interested and you've watched a few of these videos, consider channel membership, where we're going into a more formal educational structure in the videos so that we can get fast and knowledge transfer of statement analysis and forensic linguistic intelligence skills to you, so that you can spot deception or lies in your own life, whether that's personally or at work, or if you're interested in true crime as a hobby. It's a great skill to learn. So, aha moment 3, stuttering on Christopher. He stutters I, then uses past tense new for someone who's still alive and active in Canton. He owns the pizza place, which luckily used to deliver pizzas to 34 Fairview for 8 years or so. So he's minimizing. He's also stuttering. You have to ask yourselves, I mean, as an aside, I know some people believe that Karen is guilty, but the weight of evidence to her innocence is just so overwhelming. Everything from butt dialing to destroying their phones to throwing their phones away in secure military locations to changing apps that they use to more secure apps of communication to being asleep, when there's emergency services outside your house and you claim to be asleep. There's a dead cop on the lawn. I mean, it's just ridiculous to Hoslong to anyway, I mustn't I mustn't try to use convincing language on you, because that's deceptive in itself, isn't it? Perhaps I should just convey the information. As a principle of statement analysis, if somebody is convincing, like I just have been, then generally speaking, you can say that they're being deceptive. Isn't that interesting? But if they're conveying information and data, generally speaking, you can say that they're being truthful. It just so happens that I was breaking the rule there. I was using convincing language, but it's because I'm passionate about this case, and I am being truthful. So it just goes to show, rules are there to be broken. Why the past tense? Because he's processing how to answer this question, as evidenced by the false start and the tense choice. The stutter reveals the cognitive load of choosing which Albert to name as his personal connection. He can't say Kevin, that's too close to the victim, so he names Christopher instead, the safe choice. But the stutter gives away the calculation. So this individual is calculating. It's a deceptive marker. Part 2, the friend question, central deception. Would you consider Kevin Albert to be a friend? We've socially hung out after work. So here we have sensitivity, and here we have the beginnings of self-censorship. We've. So this is the brain calculating what to say in order not to give away too much information where it's dangerous to do so. Why am I over-egging these points? When a police officer is exhibiting deceptive language on the stand in a murder trial, and Karen could easily have been convicted, then we have a huge problem. A huge problem. This isn't a shoplifting case. This is somebody's life. And for a police officer to be deceptive is entirely wrong. Now, you can forgive, in some ways, the witnesses whose lives are at stake. You can forgive them for being deceptive, can't you, really? I mean, their lives are at stake. but a police officer like Forever Deva and not Diva, and this police officer and others, for them to be deceptive is wrong. And that's why this case has become international. And that's why this case is, in essence, a huge torchlight being shone on the American justice system for the world to see. And I suspect the FBI have not finished their investigation. Let's carry on with what we see from this individual on the stand.
You said there's a brotherhood among police officers, correct?
To a fact.
And, when you meet another police officer, he or she will tell you that they're, quote, on the job, correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
The objection is sustained.
And in terms of, depending on your fellow officers, you're talking.
Now that's how this judge should do it. Instead of using the language which is essentially telling the jury, I'll let him have it. Reluctantly, him. This is the language which gradually, through her drip, drip, drip bias, influences the jury. And she's not a stupid woman. She's just a biased woman. And she knows full well what she's doing. She's influencing the jury, in my opinion.
All this beginning in the police academy, correct?
Objection.
No, he can have that.
Whoa! He can have that. Do you see? And this is constant. Now, what would be interesting is, does this judge do this bias and jury influencing in every trial, or just the ones where she's been politically instructed, perhaps?
What am I taught?
Well, I'm asking you. With regard to the teamwork and, having each other's backs and, working together and depending on each other, you're taught that starting in...
Sure.
And it's reinforced over the years by superior officers and your colleagues, correct?
Sure.
Now, you were assigned as the primary investigator in the reconstruction analysis for this case, correct?
Assigned as the what?
You were assigned as the primary investigator in the reconstruction analysis for this case.
I don't know reconstruction analysis. No, I was the patrol supervisor that day.
If I may just have a moment, Your Honor.
Okay.
May I approach?
Yes.
Now, I'm going to show you what is, not sure how many pages, but there are quite a few.
Okay.
It's a...
Your Honor, if he could not describe what he's showing to the witness and
Yeah,
just
just
show
go
it to
ahead
him.
and show it to him.
Sure. I'm going to direct you, I'm taking up the first 4 pages and directing you just to the 5th page.
Okay.
And specifically the 2nd paragraph, and it's numbered number 2.
Okay.
And I will ask you if you've seen that before.
Okay.
And I'll take it back from you.
Okay.
Do you, may,
Sure.
thank you. Do you recognize what this is?
Looks like some state police form.
Okay. Is it a
Why don't you not ask him? He just answered what he thought it was.
are you familiar with a collision analysis and reconstruction section, a CARS report?
I know the state police has a CARS section that handles motor vehicle homicide.
Does this appear to be a CARS report?
I've never seen one. You just showed me one. I'm not in the state police.
Okay. But you did see that your name is listed in the paragraph that I pointed out to you?
Sure.
And you're listed as Sergeant Sean Goode, that's you, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Of the Canton Police. And you were assigned as the primary investigator in this reconstruction.
Because I wrote the offense report from that day.
Well, I'm just asking you. I'm dealing with a state police report that lists you as the primary investigator with regard to the reconstruction.
Objection, Your Honor. May we approach?
Sustained. Sure, why don't you all come up for a minute? Bring that.
Sergeant Goode, what was your understanding on February 1st?
Oh, by the way, there's another VEROSCOPE report, if you want to go and find it, from another police officer who was absolutely atrocious on the stand, who was attempting to explain to us all, the listener, about the physics of the car crash. His entire testimony was a car crash in itself. Go and check that out if you can find it.
Of 2022 regarding the Canton Police Department's role in this homicide investigation.
I believe at some point on the 29th, we recused ourselves and we weren't part of the investigation.
Okay. So you did know as of the day that John O'Keefe was found on Brian Albert's front lawn that the Canton Police had recused itself from the case, correct?
At some point, I was notified after I finished all my paperwork, yeah.
And what was your...
So at some point, after I finished all my paperwork, yeah, it was recognized that we need to recuse ourselves because we're too close to this case. But can you see the deceptive language and the deceptive facial expressions from this individual?
Understanding of the recusal decision in terms of what Canton Police was either allowed to do or not do?
Well, he had passed away, so now no matter what, it's state police investigation. It's a homicide. We do not investigate homicides.
Well, you've been a Canton Police officer for 18 years, correct?
Yes.
During those 18 years, do you know how many homicide investigations have occurred in Canton?
None.
None?
Homicides? No. That I was involved in? None.
That the department was involved in?
I can't think off the top of my head, no.
So in the 18 years, this is the first homicide that your department's been involved in, to your knowledge?
Yes.
Okay. Are you aware that although the state police have primary jurisdiction, they work hand in hand with local departments, usually, unless there's a conflict of interest?
Yes.
So in this case, you learned that there was a conflict of interest. And my question to you is, what did that mean in terms of your potential involvement in the investigation once that conflict was determined?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
We're not allowed to know that. That's too important to know. We are not allowed to know a very, very important question. Unbelievable.
Were you the primary investigator for the Canton Police Department as of February 1st?
No.
Did you participate with the state police in any part of the reconstruction?
No.
Now, Sergeant Goode, who is Brian Higgins?
He is a ATF agent that has a satellite office out of the Canton Police Department.
And when did you come to meet him?
I have no idea when he started. It's been years.
Years, over a decade?
I don't think so, but maybe.
Between 5 and 10 years?
Sure.
And how often would you see him at the Canton Police Station?
I worked midnights, so during that time, but I mean, 3 times a week I would see him. I mean, but we don't have the same work schedule.
Okay, notice the complete deceptive language and the cognitive breakdown, which those who know the VEROSCOPE channel well by now, you'll have recognized immediately. Do put in the comments what you're seeing and what you're hearing.
When he works, he doesn't know when I do.
Okay, and when you say you work midnights, that means you come in at midnight?
Yes.
At 8 a.m.?
Correct.
And he works in the same building as you in terms of the fact that he has an office there, correct?
Yes.
Are there any other ATF agents that have offices at the Canton?
There could be. They don't check in with us.
Do you know?
Okay, so why have we suddenly got cognitive breakdown and deceptive stuttering and patterns. Let's catch up with the analysis. So we're going back a little bit. We have the beginning of the linguistic avoidance and breakdown. The structure of his response is striking. We're going back to here. This is earlier on. Would you also consider Kevin Albert to be a friend? Nice, simple question. Look how the breakdown starts to begin. Yeah. So we have the false start. We've. We have the restart on the pronoun. We call this sensitive. We would often mark this, if we were marking up the document, we would mark that in pink. Socially hung out. A descriptive phrase rather than the direct answer. He was asked, are you a friend? Do you consider Kevin Albert to be a friend? Instead, we've got yeah, self-censorship, we've, sensitivity, socially hung out, which is a change in phrase, a descriptive phrase rather than the direct answer, and then we have a qualifier after work. So here we have flag, 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 in a very short answer to a very simple question. And this was really the beginning of Sgt Goode's fall into an entire deceptive pattern on the witness stand. What else happened next? You'd expect, this is Yannetti, you'd expect that he would have your back in a crisis, correct? I hope he would defend me. What working? Yes, he's a police officer. Okay, so why are we seeing this? Because what he's really worried about is the truth coming out about the bias of the investigation and the planting of evidence in the investigation and various other aspects which he may not be involved in directly, but when somebody has potential knowledge that this is going to be a defense principle, they become extremely defensive. And when that knowledge is sensitive, we start to see the linguistic breakdowns from the cognitive effort to avoid the potential truth coming out. So that's really what's happening, in my opinion, and why we're seeing the deceptive patterns from this officer. 3 stutters on a single pronoun, I. This represents significant cognitive processing. It's partly choosing what to say next, and so it buys extra cognitive time. It's partly a method of self-censorship where at the rapid speed of choosing the words from the Broca area of the brain, they decide rapidly that they're not happy with what they're going to say. They begin again, decide rapidly that they're not happy with what they're going to say, and they begin again. So it's a mixture of different cognitive techniques that the unconscious is able to perform at such a rapid rate that to most people they would miss this. But when you know the pattern, you can start to pick it up. And when you start getting good at forensic linguistic intelligence, you can start to pick these patterns up at conversational speed. And then you have the ability to determine, without a transcript in front of you, but at that conversational speed, whether or not somebody is being deceptive to you. And that, as a life skill, is enormously valuable. So, I think we'll leave today's analysis where we are, and we'll come back to Sgt Goode for part 2, because I don't want to speed this up. There's a lot to cover, and I'd prefer to cover it in detail. He's probably one of the witnesses that you haven't seen or heard a lot from, if you've been following this case. But he's an important witness because he can tie a lot of the deceptions together. Anyway, let's leave that for part 2 and possibly part 3. So if you haven't followed already or subscribed already, please do. It really helps to expand the reach of this analysis. And I think these cases are important to expand the reach of. If you're thinking of learning forensic linguistic intelligence, consider joining the channel as a member. There are 2 levels. One is more to support the channel and support our work and help us to spend enough time on these VEROSCOPEs. And we're producing 4 or 5 a week. So your support would be really helpful on the lower tier. And we put some of the training into that lower tier to give you some examples of what the training's like. And then in the higher tier, which we've called Inspector, I think the lower tier is called Detective, and then, or something like that. And then the higher tier is called Inspector. In that tier, we're doing the entire course. And I'll put more and more of the course into the lower tier as time goes on so that everybody can learn. But if you want the full course as it's delivered rather than waiting months, the higher tier is also available. Okay, hope that makes sense. Speak to you as we go on to Sgt Goode Part 2, most likely tomorrow. Okay, enjoy the rest of the day.